welcome to all of you. I just have one housekeeping matter that I need, two things I need to discuss. One, please, I got a list today of clubs that are outstanding incoming officers. Please look and see that all your incoming officers are listed on Rotary.org and My Rotary. That is really important so that Rotary International can communicate with you. Also, so that we can communicate with the relevant officers as we seek to make our arrangements for the new year. The second thing I need to ask is that you register for the PETS and conference as was sent out by the district secretary at the end of January. It's $500 US per club for the PETS and conference. These sessions are not a part of the registration, but they most certainly are part of the training which you would be receiving had you been going to a regular district conference. So I urge you to ensure that your clubs are registered so that we get full participation by that April meeting. So I now turn it over to Cheryl, or I'm not sure who's doing the bio for Lara, but please enjoy to soak up all the information, lots of information tonight and coming. Okay, so enjoy everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DGE Sonia. Yes, it's me. Good evening all. PDG Lara Quentrell Thomas. It's really my privilege to introduce you here this evening. Lara has had 30 years experience in talent and HR management, including 25 at the helm of Regency Recruitment and Resources Limited in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. She holds an MBA, BA certificates in HR, contract law, and critical thinking. She's the founder and chairman of Regency Recruitment and Resources Limited, 1996 to date. She provides strategic leadership, business development, and client relationship development for Trinidad's largest search and selection firm. She creates and delivers customized training programs in areas such as professional networking, customer service, resume writing, interviewing, excellent and business etiquette. Participates in national and media consultations and conversations on issues related to labor, employment, and diversity. Clients include GE, IBM, Coca-Cola, IDB, BP, BHP Billiton, USAID, Nestle, and Citibank. HR manager, Sadek Verde Limited, London, UK. She's a senior recruiter, the Times Group, London, UK. Recruiter at Hubstone, London, UK. Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industry. She's the president since 2018. Office of Procurement and Regulation. She's a director, January 18th to December 20th. Involved also in Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago, director since 2016. She has been a member from the Rotary Club of Central Port of Spain, director, district governor, model, UN chair, 1999 to date. Association of Female Executives of Trinidad and Tobago, founding president, member from 2000 to date. She's also involved with the TNT Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Employment and Labor Relations Committee member since 2019. She has many awards, which includes the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, 2015 finalist and Corporate Social Responsibility Awardee, Napa River Girls High School Alumni Award, Excellence in Business. Now I'll go off script here because I've known Lara for a little more than a decade, almost 2 decades. I know Lara and I were AGs together, and Lara's initials of a surname, Quentrell Thomas, is of course QT. So that's how I usually call Lara. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce PDG Lara QT. Lara?
Thank you very much, Deb. Good evening, everyone. To all of my lovely Rotary family across the Caribbean and even a few little people in Europe that have joined us this evening. It's so lovely to be here. I'm going to share my screen and let's hope that this works. Can everybody see my slides? Yes, we're good? All right, fantastic. So first of all, my thanks to Sonia, our district governor-elect, for inviting me to spend a bit of time with you this evening, and to Luana for harassing me daily to submit my slides. I do appreciate the constant reminders. I know how difficult it is to juggle all of the different speakers and presentations and everything. And of course, we have to say thanks to Paddy and the IT team for their continued excellence in all of the training that we've been doing over the last few months, thanks to COVID. Unfortunately, virtually not in person, but still great to get together. I see we have 130 something people on the call this evening, so that's really exciting. So I've been asked to talk to you this evening a bit about leading your team. Most of you with us this evening, of course, are incoming team presidents, club leaders, and so we're going to go through a few thoughts on some strategies to effectively lead your team. I loved that TEDx talk about connecting having a common unity, because one of the most important things that you know as a leader, and most of you are leaders in your own businesses, in your own lives before becoming Rotary presidents, is that you have to have that shared purpose. You have to have those common goals to make sure that every member of your club is going in the same direction and really is buying into that vision, and it's so important. So I really appreciate that video as a starting point for our dialogue this evening. So let me get straight into it. What we're going to go through, and there's a lot, but I know the slides will be shared with you, so you'll get a chance. You won't need to take notes. You'll get all the details. But we're going to go through 6 key components of effectively running your club from July 1st for the 12 months you have. And really, you don't have a lot of time. Most of you, I hope, will have been working with your existing president, your current board, to ensure a smooth transition to the new board of directors from July 1. But there are some fundamentals to running a club to make sure that you have a successful year. So really what we're going to go through are some framework, some basic building blocks. So this is not necessarily the big projects, the fundraising, the end polio, all of those things. It's more on a gritty, nitty-gritty level of day-to-day how to run your club effectively. So we're going to go through things like how to have a successful meeting, some of the things you need to do around setting goals and ensuring you have collaboration in your club. And I will talk a bit about Rotary protocols, although this is not a presentation on protocols. There is a whole separate conversation around that, but we are going to highlight a few of the key ones. So running a successful meeting, there are really 3 fundamental steps in making sure that every meeting you host, and of course now you're hosting many of them virtually, but the same rules will apply, making sure you host a meeting successfully. The first is planning. You know, without a proper plan, without preparation, even if it's a weekly club meeting, but certainly for your board meetings, your project meetings, committee meetings, you have to have a plan. You really need to understand, first of all, why are we meeting at all? You know, one of the things that I love and hate most about Rotary are the meetings, because, you know, we meet every week and then you've got the board and the committees and the projects and this, and it's constant meetings. And one of the things that, and which is wonderful for fellowship and all of those great things. But one of the things that COVID has taught us is that, in fact, often we may not need a meeting. A simple email conversation may suffice, or a WhatsApp chat may suffice. So first of all, make sure that you are really, truly do need a meeting for the particular purpose that you've established. Obviously, if it's your board, absolutely critical that you meet once a month. If it's your club, you meet as often as you've determined, but there may be other options available to you. You have to have a clear agenda, and you should also have a process for your meeting. So who is going to speak when, how much time is allotted to each speaker. It's important now, with us having so much of our lives online, we spend so much time in front of a screen. The last thing you want is to be in a meeting that's going on and on and on, or somebody's hogging the meeting, that there's no real leadership, there's no stewardship of the details of the meeting and what needs to be done. So make sure that you're controlling the meeting. So that only can be done with a plan. And it's important also to overcome any potential barriers. So Luana shared with us at the beginning, for example, if you're going to speak, unmute yourself, make sure that you don't have any background noise. Now, with us doing all of our work online, it's really important that the members of your meeting are in a quiet place, that they're joining the meeting in a way that's going to be respectful to everybody who's there, not constantly distracted, not extra outside noise. So for those of you that are going to be leading your meetings, ask your participants to really put themselves in a space that's quiet and conducive to getting through the work that needs to be done. You conduct your meeting. Secondly, of course, you follow the ground rules that you've established. Cell phones must be turned off. Everybody must have their cameras on. Everybody stays on mute until they wish to speak. Whatever the ground rules are, make sure you establish them up front with your new board. How are we going to conduct our meetings to get the most out of the hour, 2 hours that we're going to spend together? It's very important to record what's decided, and I'll talk in a second about minute taking, and then make sure that you end with the next steps. So every meeting should finish certainly with a sense of the achievement, a sense that we've actually got through some things, we've made some great decisions, important decisions, but also very clearly what happens next, who does what, by when, with whom, what tools. So it's important that you have action items. It's important that members leave with a sense of what they have to do next, that sense of purpose. And then if you have the opportunity to evaluate how the meeting went, to get feedback from your members, particularly perhaps your club secretary who's recording the meeting, taking the minutes, to find out where we could improve. Maybe we let one member speak for too long. Maybe we didn't control the program effectively enough. You have to be respectful of people's time. You have to be able to control the meeting as the president. So make sure that you really do review and improve, as we do with our projects. Those of you that are in project management will know you're constantly looking, monitoring, evaluating, tweaking to make sure that every meeting is better than the last one. So 3 critical elements to planning, to running a successful meeting. Make sure you plan it properly, you conduct it according to the rules that you've established, and then you monitor and evaluate and tweak to make sure that you're improving as you go along. I recommend that your secretary or whomever is designated to send the agenda and the minutes, that those be done at least a week before the meeting. If you're having a monthly board meeting, they should be sent at least 2 weeks before, so in the middle of the period between board meetings. It's really not acceptable that the night before the board meeting or the day of, your directors are getting their minutes. You have to establish protocols to make sure that they get minutes in a timely fashion, they understand what action items they're assigned, so that they can actually do the work in between the meetings. If you cannot attend as the president or even as a committee chairman, you should certainly, as the president, appoint perhaps your president-elect or even your IPP to chair the meeting on your behalf. If you're a committee chairman and you can't attend, you should at the very least send a report. It's really unacceptable, and I know people are busy. I know our lives are crazy at the moment and there's so many other things going on and you may not be able to attend. But at the very least, send the president an update on what you've done since the last meeting, where your various projects are, so that can be shared with your colleagues. Always RSVP. We have a tradition, I think, I don't know if it's the whole Caribbean, but in Trinidad, we have this really bizarre thing where we don't RSVP, but then we just show up. Or we do RSVP and then we don't show up. I don't know if that's a whole Caribbean thing, but it's very hard to plan an event or a party or anything in this country because the people who say they're coming often don't show and the people who never replied show up. So it's important as professionals, as Rotarians, as colleagues, remember you've got a common purpose, a common unity, to at least be courteous enough to reply to your president or your secretary and say, yes, I'll be attending, or no, I won't. During the meeting, I talked about some of your ground rules. Make sure you stick to your agenda. Focus on issues. Board meetings should never get to the point where you're talking about people, whether it's persons on the board or members of your club. Talk about the issues, not the people, okay? There is a concept in meeting management called parking lot, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, which is where you are in a discussion and it's going off topic, it's taking you off the agenda, it's going on too long. You can put it in the parking lot. So you as the president will say, okay, folks, I'm going to stick a pin, as I say a lot, in this topic. I'm going to put it in the parking lot. If we have time at the end, we will come back to it, or we'll adjourn a separate meeting to discuss it. So maybe there's an issue around a particular project that's going off track, or a particular issue with membership dues or something. You've got an agenda, you've got a finite amount of time. Don't waste it. If something is going on a particular track and it's taking you off your agenda, put it in the parking lot and schedule a time to come back to it. Or as I say, at the end of the meeting, those who wish to remain and hash it out. So it's really important as a leader in your club to focus on solutions. Don't point fingers, don't blame people. You know, we are managing volunteers. And I have to confess, those who know me, and I know my president-elect is on this call, so I have to be careful what I say, Percy, but you know, I struggle sometimes well at 9 o'clock, and if you haven't replied by 9:15, you must be dead. And I know that's my own thing, and I know that's my own barrier to overcome, my own hurdle. And Percy will know that well about me. So I do struggle with that as a director in my club to why is everybody not operating at the same level? But you have to focus on the solution. If somebody is not pulling their weight, if a project's not being delivered in the way that you had agreed, how do we fix it? We shouldn't point fingers, we should try and find solutions. So it's a mindset as a leader. It's one I struggle with, if I'm honest, but it's important to remember that we are volunteers. So your secretary, and again, the secretaries will obviously be having training throughout PETS. So it's important that your secretary is fully equipped and trained and ready and understands their role. If the secretary can't attend a meeting, a minute taker must be appointed. You should probably have a deputy secretary anyway, or somebody who can easily slot into that role if the secretary is unavailable. But the importance of minutes cannot be underestimated or understated. Every meeting that you have as a club, regular meetings, club forums, strategic planning, and of course your board meetings, committee meetings, there should be minutes, both noting who attended, of course, but also what were the key decisions. It does not have to be a word for word, blow by blow narrative of what was discussed, but it must record key decisions made under your various avenues of service or projects, and of course, action items and the way forward. It's a really important resource for your incoming board to be able to look at board minutes from the last year of board meetings, and project leaders, if they're taking over a new avenue of service, to get the minutes from meetings of the last year so they understand what were the decisions taken, what projects were successful, what were abandoned, why they were abandoned, what changes were made. It's important that you stay on track with your objectives, and the minutes are an essential tool for that purpose. They don't have to be long. You know, some minutes are really a nightmare to read because it's almost every word and, you know, what people were wearing and who said what, and it doesn't have to be that in-depth. It can be bullet points. It can be very high-level decisions, but they must be done. They're not optional. So make sure, one of the things that I recommend is that you have a format, you have a template for your minutes. It's a very easy thing to do. You share it with your team members on your board. So every committee, every meeting that you have, the same format of minutes. Okay, it can be we use a table we used to in our club with each avenue of service, key decisions, action items, timelines. Very simple. So it doesn't have to be a 20-page document, but they must be done. They should, of course, include any of your decisions made and they should be in line with your goals and your objectives. If any votes are taken, so if you have a vote, perhaps something to do with your board of directors, an election, a nomination, something like that, all the votes should be recorded. So if you have a board of 11 and there are 11 people voting, you should record a list of all the names and how they voted. If the members are not comfortable with that method, then at the very least you should have 6 yes, 5 no, or whatever the actual final tally of votes was. It cannot just be that the board agreed to undertake X. If there was a vote, the number of votes should be recorded. And as I said, they should be sent at least 2 weeks before the next meeting with the action items highlighted. So some useful words in board minutes, certainly, or any minutes that you're taking, and these come from corporate secretaries and some of the boards that I sit on, and you heard Dev talked about. but we actually use formal language in our board minutes. There should not be, for example, lots of abbreviations. You can use the acronyms that we are familiar with in our Rotary language, but you should write things out properly, because remember, these are part of your archives. So just because those of you in the room at the time know what that abbreviation means, doesn't mean that somebody reading the minutes in 6 months' time will know. So the secretary has to use proper language, proper full names. You can use abbreviations once they have been defined at the beginning of the minutes. So if you're abbreviating your members by their initials, for example, you need to list the names, identify the initials, and then you can refer to them. There shouldn't be random abbreviations in the minutes that nobody knows what they refer to. So it's important to use proper language. And there are many, many examples of what you can use to make sure that your minutes have that proper level of professionalism. The second thing, or the third thing, is actually setting your goals. And of course, this really comes now. This is what you're doing now with your incoming board. As Sonia mentioned, you have to go on to Rotary Club Central to put in your directors, your club leaders, but you also need to input your goals. So this is a really important tool for you to set the direction of your club. In many cases, certainly in my club, many of the goals from the previous year are just transferred to the following year. They may be tweaked slightly, but we generally do have similar goals year on year. You should have goals around foundation giving. You must have them around your service projects, membership growth, and of course, public image. Those are the things that Rotary is going to ask you to measure. And then as you go through your year, it's important that you or your secretary is regularly putting in updates. How are we doing against our goals? I recommend that once you've created your goals on Rotary Club Central, you've put them in, that you share them with your club so that everybody understands what the intent of the club is for this year, so that you understand what you're aiming for in each of the different avenues of service or the different project areas, so that everybody can buy in to where we're going as a club. It should not be some sort of nebulous, well, I'm not really sure what we're going to give to the foundation this year, or I don't really know what our membership goals are. Every member in the club, even if it's just a high-level summary, should know what the goals are. And then, of course, they are broken down for the individual committee chairman. They should be in line with our Rotary International strategic goals. There are 3 of those. I know you're familiar with them, so I'm not going to spend time on them. But whenever you're doing your goal setting for your club and your planning, make sure you're in line with our district goals and then, of course, our Rotary International goals. Use that as a framework, because you can't go wrong if you're in line with what the district and Rotary International want clubs to do. And once you have your goals, you then break them down into objectives. And this is where each of your different project chairman, avenue of service chairman, committee chairs should take the overarching goal and with their committee break it down into some specific action items that they can achieve over the 12 months that we've got in our Rotary year. Many of us are familiar with the SMART acronym, but it's important to understand that every goal has to have deliverables, has to have objectives. And I know you know this. Every Rotarian is a business person, a business leader. We are managers, we are business owners, we're entrepreneurs. We do this in our lives, we do this for our jobs. But very few of us actually do spend time doing this for our Rotary clubs. So take that skill that you have in the life that pays your mortgage and transfer it to the life that pays to end polio. Transfer your skills. Think about the way that you've done this in your real job and how you can then transfer this to your Rotary club, because it's important that every committee member knows the tasks that they have to perform over the 12 months that they have ahead of them. They understand the resources that are available. They understand how it's going to be measured. And of course, building into that as the club leader, the rewards and recognition is an absolutely crucial part. Every time a milestone is hit, we celebrate. Every time a project is successful, we give tokens of appreciation. These things are important as well to keep your Rotarians engaged and feeling, you know, like a sense of satisfaction. So break your goals. You have your high-level goals based on RI and the district, those goals for your club, and then each committee needs to break them down. And this then becomes your agenda for your meeting. because you have a clear list of things that you have to talk about every single month. How are we doing? This was a 6-month project. We're now in month 2. We were supposed to have done 3 tasks. Have we done them? If we haven't, why not? What do we need to tweak? It's as simple as that. Although it sounds simple, but it's not, because we have other reasons why things don't get done. But it's important to have that structure, even if it's very simple, around your goals and your objectives. Oops. The next thing I want to talk briefly about is how you build collaboration. And this really does tie into the goals and the objectives, because if the club doesn't have clear goals and a clear vision, and you as the leader are not really taking them with you on that journey, it's very hard to build collaboration. If people don't buy into the vision, they're not going to step up and take their fair share of the work. We all know the Rotary Club formula, where 20% of the members do 80% of the work. That is true of organizations around the world in every culture, I think. But every member can contribute something. It's really important to know your members, and many of us have smaller clubs, so it's easier to get to know every single member and understand what they can give, which project they really are excited about. Maybe there's a member who's been on the fundraising committee for the last 10 years, but he doesn't really like fundraising. He's never really done a very good job. You know, it's just not his thing. And he'd love to be on public image, or he'd love to be involved with training new members. And training new members and orienting new members, just on a sidebar, is a really fantastic use of your senior Rotarians. So remember, you have to have membership growth. You've got to have orientation and training. So really tap into your senior Rotarians for that particular element of your goal setting, your objectives. But everybody in the club has to do something. Really, that's why you're a Rotarian. So you need to understand what people are willing to contribute, and then obviously ask people to take their part. Charles Darwin talked about the fact that the most successful species, those that prevail, are those that collaborate and improvise. So collaboration, that sense of working together, is absolutely essential for you as a leader. And there's 3 ways that you can do that: through your culture, your people, and then of course you as the leader. So let's have a look at each one of those quickly. It's essential that you embed the importance of collaboration. Everything you do as the club leader needs to demonstrate why collaboration is important. It's really about building it into the culture of your club. And most of us already collaborate. We don't do projects on our own. We already work together. But collaboration is a lot more than teamwork. Collaboration, as the first commentary suggested, is about everybody pulling their weight, everybody contributing. So true collaboration is where all 38 members of your club are actually adding value, which is a difficult thing to do, but it's not impossible. So it's really a lot more than teamwork. It's really about saying to people, this is why you're in the club. This is what is unique and fabulous and special about our club. This is why you joined. This is what you've done. This is what you're going to do. Where do you want to go with the club? And that collaboration should be effortless, because it's embedded into the value of your club. It's part of the culture of your club. It should be part of your mission statement. It should be part of everything you do. And that's as your role as a leader. And again, if I'm being honest, you know, is it the truth? This is something that I struggle with, because very often it's just easier to just go, okay, fine, I'll just do it myself. We've all been there. You know, okay, don't worry, I'll do it. I suffer from that a lot. And it is a temptation, because you've got things to get done and you've got limited time, and your sponsors want to hear from you. But that's really not the ideal way to build a collaborative club. It's not the ideal way to lead your club. Look for ways that you can get your members involved in, even if it's a small way, because if everybody's not involved, the club is not realizing its full potential. So then, of course, you speak to your people is the second pillar. And this is where I talked earlier about the membership. So important. Every time you bring in a new member, or even talking to a potential member, remind them about collaboration as part of the culture of your club. Show them how important it is to achieve the mission and the projects that we've outlined. So it's important that we also should be looking for collaboration outside our club. with other clubs, with sponsors, with communities, with our interactors, with our Rotaractors. So it's really critical as part of your membership recruitment and orientation to stress the value of collaboration. And then, of course, if you have members who actually foster it, come up with some great new synergies, develop relationships with other clubs or other NGOs or whatever it might be, that we reward that and we celebrate that sort of collaboration, because that is really going to be the engine that drives our clubs. And now, particularly where funds are limited, a lot of NGOs are fighting for scraps. Now more than ever, we have to collaborate with other NGOs, with other Rotary clubs. You know, we may be pursuing the same goals and we don't even realize it. So collaboration is critical. And finally, as I said, you model the behavior. You, as the leader of your club, have to model collaborative behavior. You share information. You should not be MI5, top secret. We never know what's going on. And lots of clubs, leaders and presidents, even those of us at the district governor level, get accused of that. You know, we're not sharing information. People don't know what's happening. The culture of your club should be one of openness, one of transparency, accountability, of course. If you said you're going to do something, you're supposed to do it, but really around, as the leader, setting the tone and the sort of tenor of your club around open conversation and collaboration. And you also need to look for synergies outside your club and look for them even within your Rotary family, and framing collaboration as a path. Use the basis of collaboration to drive your club forward. And of course, you have to collaborate with your board. You collaborate with the incoming president, the past president, your district leaders, your district attorney general, sorry. Got it on my brain. Assistant governor, AG. Right? This is what happens when you use too many acronyms. Your assistant governor, you collaborate with other clubs, share ideas, share mistakes, share learnings. You know, we tried this, it didn't work. Here are the reasons why. So I remember we had a fascinating conversation a few months ago on a similar Zoom chat with Rotary about fundraising and looking at some of the projects that other clubs had done and mistakes that were made and lessons learned. That is an important, powerful part of collaboration. So even if it's just with the clubs in your country or your community, you'll get your AG together and talk about the ways that you can collaborate. I want to talk very briefly about managing club finances. This is not my area of expertise as a professional, but I have been successful in accessing grant funding for a number of years for my club, both from within Rotary as well as external donors. So I'm very aware of the need for funding and the challenges of operating with limited financing. As I mentioned, also, many of us are now going after limited resources in the NGO community. You have to have strong stewardship of your funds. It is essential. You should have a treasurer, of course. You should have a finance committee. You should also have an audit committee. These people don't have to be finance professionals, but it does help to have one or two on those committees, or maybe even there's somebody in your community that doesn't want to be a Rotarian, doesn't have the time, but doesn't mind actually sharing some financial expertise with your club from time to time. This is a good example of collaboration. Because remember, you are dealing with money that is not yours. It is member dues, it is members of the public have bought tickets or made donations, and of course we have grant funds and we have donor funds. So it's absolutely essential that you have a robust financial management mechanism. I know the District Governor Lyle is very strong on this as well, and I'm sure there's been a lot of learning around this topic over the last few months, and there will be during PETS. But you know, if your club is not strong in this area, and to be honest, we were not for a long time. My club was not great in this area. We were very lucky to have 2 or 3 Rotarians who are finance professionals, who took up the baton and sorted us out with audits and bringing our management accounts up to date, and we're now in a much better position. We had multiple bank accounts all over the place. We didn't know what they were for. We've streamlined that. We've streamlined our finance reporting, but it was a journey. But that was one of our goals as a club, and we're much, much better off for it. So if you don't have strong finance professionals in your club, why don't you go and recruit some? Look in your community for some finance professionals who could actually come in and help this become a real strength in your club. You've got to have a budget for the year, of course, the whole club, and then for every project. As I said, you must have an oversight committee that tracks your spending and your revenue in line with your budgets. You should always have an annual external audit. I know these can be expensive, but there are smaller well, certainly the Trinidad experience, there are smaller accounting firms who are willing to do this at a reduced cost for NGOs. But if you're going to apply for grant funding, you have to have audited financials. You should have them for at least the last 3 years. So as an incoming club president, make sure that what you're inheriting is solid. Make sure that the outgoing president is organizing those things for you so that you have them to start your year. You should have separate bank accounts for your fundraising money and your operations, your club admin money, of course. And then you may be required from time to time, if you get funds from a particular source, to open another bank account. That is very, very difficult to do in the Caribbean at the moment. It's a nightmare, but sometimes it's mandatory. So we received money a few years ago from the UN for our model United Nations project. And one of the criteria was that we had to open a separate bank account. So, you know, again, you have to think about these things. It may be something that you're required to do. You have to have proper authorization, 2 signatories, all of those good things. Stewardship. So if anybody comes in and says, I want to see the club accounts, I want to make sure that that $100,000 I gave you was spent properly, you have nothing to hide. Transparency, honesty, integrity, accountability, these are things that we stand for. So that should be evident in our finances as well. Okay? And your board should get a monthly report on finances, even if it's just a high level, bank balances, every avenue of service, what's been spent, what came in, so that we can track how we're doing against our budget. For most clubs, all clubs, COVID shook everything up. We didn't get money that we were expecting. We couldn't hold fundraising events that we had planned. So we've had to rejig our budgets. We've had to rethink how we do things, but that doesn't mean that we drop the ball and become sloppy. Okay? So it's important to have good financial management because it's a requirement of a professional organization. It's a good way to manage risk. You can see things coming, you can anticipate the club's going to run out of money in 3 months. We've saved some money with COVID because we're not necessarily having meals together anymore. But at the same time, we've also lost revenue because we're not having fundraising events. So, you know, there are the different sides of the coin that we have to look at. And as I mentioned, it's essential for grant applications. I would say to you that even if you're looking for district grants, of course, for Rotary International grants, Rotary Foundation grants, sorry, you have to have audited financials. It should become part of the routine annual process of your club. And then finally, Rotary protocols. I did mention that I'm not going to spend too much time on this, so this will bring the presentation to a close. But it's essential that you know your Rotary protocols. Those of you that are coming into leadership have to set the example. There is a presentation that I actually did, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago now, on the Rotary website that has a bit more detail around this. It has where to put your knives and forks and how to hold your soup spoon and all of those lovely things. So you can go and have a look at that. But I want to talk very briefly about some key things that we have to be mindful of in our Rotary protocols. The first is how we recognize and salute our visiting Rotary dignitaries. And the RI board actually has a recommended protocol for this, so that you, when you are welcoming guests to a virtual or an in-person event, and there are senior Rotarians in the room as either your speakers or just your invited guests, or even members of your club, they have to be recognized in a particular order. And this is the order that Rotary International recommends. There is a formal process and a procedure by which you recognize. It's absolutely critical as well, and I know it changes and it can be a bit last minute, but to recognize all of the senior Rotarians in the room. And by senior, we mean persons who've held district and higher responsibilities. You don't necessarily have to recognize every past president, or although that may be your club culture, but certainly persons who are serving at the district level and of course the zone level and so on. So make sure you have the order correct. That's what's important. Don't forget anybody, and refer to them in the correct order. You should also recognize persons who have more than one office by either their highest office. So somebody who, I mean, for example, I have been both a president and a district governor. You should recognize me as a past district governor, or anybody else who served in that role. If I then, like PDG David, who's with us, has served a number of roles at the zone level, then you would recognize his zone portfolio above his district governor portfolio. So these are small things, but they can actually have a real impact. They can actually be quite offensive if you don't get them right. You know, I've heard stories of, not too often, thankfully, Rotarians leaving the event because senior Rotarians, because they weren't recognized, or they weren't recognized properly, or their spouse wasn't mentioned. So, I mean, hopefully you know the characters in the room, but you don't always, because it may be somebody from another country, another island. So make sure you get the protocols correct. All protocols observed is something that I actually love and I use, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, although I do know some people hate it. In Trinidad, when we have events here, official events with government ministers and so on, there is this awful thing where everybody who stands up recognizes everybody again. So you get the list of VIPs half a dozen times. I don't think that's necessary. I think all protocols observed is perfectly fine, but you must know what's comfortable for your club and what's appropriate. But get down to business. People are not there to hear about all the VIPs and the hoi polloi. They want to hear, you know, the meat of the matter. When the governor visits you, and you're going to have super virtual visits now, so Sonia's going to be zooming in literally to all of the clubs, coming to see you virtually. But when the district governor is at his or her official visit, there should be no additional speakers. You should not have a guest speaker the night, and typically, of course, it would be a dinner. Many of us who are PDGs would have given our feature address at a dinner meeting of a number of clubs in a particular country. The governor should be the only speaker. The governor takes priority in that evening, in that event, and he or she should have really they are the feature speaker. So once they have spoken, then you just do your vote of thanks. You don't bring in somebody else, your minister of education or your prime minister. If you have another speaker, then the DG should not speak. The district governor's visit is essential to how we operate our Rotary district, how we operate our clubs. And the district governor needs to be given the respect and the time to share with the members of your club and your community the plans and goals for our district. So bear that in mind. And finally, if you are going to pray, and I know we all have different practices in different clubs, but your prayers should always be non-denominational. It's important that you are respectful of the fact that you have members of all faiths, and there are persons in your club who have no faith. So there are standard Rotary prayers that you can use if you have one at all, but I don't recommend freelancing, inviting somebody. You know, we have this in my club where we'll just pick somebody to say a prayer at the beginning of the meeting, which is fine because we all know each other and we're friends. But if we have guests or visitors, or the district governor is there with us, sometimes our prayers in my club are specifically Christian. And in my club, we have Hindus and Muslims. So I always find that very awkward. And it is something that we know better, and we shouldn't do it that way. But within our little group, it's not offensive because everybody knows everybody. But if you have a guest, a visitor, a keynote speaker, Rotaractors, whoever, make sure, please, that you're remembering that this is an all-inclusive club, right? My last thought for you, my last image, is about the positioning of flags, and this goes back certainly in the English-speaking Caribbean to our military traditions. So this is how your flags go. This is, of course, if you're meeting in person, but even if you're hosting a virtual event, a handing over ceremony and so on, and you've got a head table set up, the president always sits in the middle of the table with the ranking guest to his or her right. So that would be the district governor, for example, if the district governor was visit. The second most important visitor goes to the president's left, and so you go. The flag of Rotary is always if I'm the president and I'm facing my audience, the Rotary flag will be on my left and my country flag will be on my right behind us. Okay, if you have multiple country flags, so for example, if I'm a Trinidad and Tobago club and the district governor is visiting from her home country of Barbados, and I have the flags of Trinidad and Barbados, the Trinidad flag is on the right and the Barbados flag is then next to it. You can also have 3 flags behind you in an order. My understanding with that one, although I do stand to be corrected, is that your country flag is in the middle, the Barbados flag would then be on the right, and the Rotary Club would then be on the left. Country flags always take precedence, okay? So, but do some research. If you're not sure and you've got 10 flags and you don't know what to do with them, do some research, because these things are important. And I'll just share one last anecdote with you before I leave. We had, you know, our district is 46,000 countries and clubs and flags and people, and it's just crazy mad variety, diversity, which is why we love it. And we have had pets and things where we've been in person. We've had all our country flags, and a country flag was upside down. I'm sure some of the PDGs will remember. Now, those people involved in putting the flags up, it was not their country flag, so they didn't know. The Trinidad flag is a good example. Which way does the stripe go? But those of us sitting in the audience for whom that was our country flag, terribly offended. My flag is upside down. So these are small things, but they're actually huge things, because they can really change the tone of an event. They can really make people feel proud, happy to celebrate with you, or not so much. So I hope that was helpful. I don't know how we're doing with time. At 10 to 7, so I'm happy to take a couple of questions, and thank you very much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you, PDG Lara. That was a lot of information, I think, but concisely presented. And I think, you touched on quite a bit of stuff that I think all the incoming leaders really need to sit up and listen to. So we do have some questions in the chat box. There's a question, the first question that came in. All right, about the recording. All right, Ernest is asking, should all committees provide minutes for all their meetings to the president?
So that's a great question, Ernest. I would say yes. Certainly, they should go to the club secretary for records. So every time a committee meets, there should be minutes that are sent to the club archives, if you have them in the cloud or in a virtual repository. So if not the president, the secretary, but yes, they shouldn't just be kept with the committee chairperson.
Thank you. And Leah is asking a question, how should a club deal with a member in terms of confidentiality and using the club information to share outside of Rotary and in a way that is malicious? How do we deal with that?
Leah, that sounds like you and I need to have a conversation. Wow. Well, okay, first of all, I can't imagine what Rotary information would be, what would be so terrible that couldn't be shared with the public. So perhaps we can have a conversation. You could give me a bit more detail. But any member of the club who is bringing Rotary into disrepute, we have guidelines for that. Who's somebody who is, generally not representing the club in the way that you would like to be presented. You have to have a conversation with them. You have to remind them of the bylaws of your club, the RI constitution. I have read about some clubs who actually have developed, really because of social media more than anything else, but they've developed a code of conduct for their members. So particularly around things like what you post, how you post. I'll just tell you a very quick story. We had a situation 100 years ago in my club where we had an event and photographs were taken. And one of the photographs was of a senior member of our club. Well, you know Trinidad, right? He was whining on a gill. For those of you, so for the non-Trinis, he was dancing with a young lady in a very intimate way, who was not his wife. Good. So the photographs went on Facebook, all of them. Nobody screened them. Nobody asked for permission. They all went on Facebook. And of course, he found out. He saw his wife found out. He left the club. She left him. It was just a fiasco, right? So I'm just saying to say that, since social media, we've got a whole new platform now where we can actually do a lot of damage to Rotary, to Rotarians and our various communities. So a code of conduct, a code of ethics is not a bad idea for new members. something to think about in your club, how you share information. And maybe you can broach it in a way that we're all going to sign it now because we've got all these new things that we didn't have when we started. But you have to have a conversation, and somebody who's not representing your club in the right way has to be either fixed or asked to leave. You know, they say in HR, you change your if you can't change your people, you change your people. Right? So if I can't change your behavior, then there's the door. Go and join Lions.
Thank you for that. I know that too, that with the WhatsApp groups as well, I mean, that's an excellent point in terms of having a code of conduct, but also having guidelines for the WhatsApp group, because we've seen that could affect in a very damaging way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that we've had that as well, Liz. Thanks. Yeah, that's a good example where people start posting, you know, inappropriate images and videos, and there's a lot of in our part of the world, so much politics and, you know, peacock and things, all sorts of things going around, and yeah, you get some horrible stuff on WhatsApp. Agreed.
Yes. All right. Thanks. Sharianne has a question, and I think PDG David was attempting to respond to the question, but she's asking whether the treasurer of the club is the person responsible for making financial decisions, or is it the club itself? I believe PDG David is trying to let her know that the board was elected by the members of the club, and there's some amount of trust in terms of the decision they make, and they're expected to make wise decisions, as they go forward. So I don't know if you want to add anything to what PDG David has said.
No, well, of course, he's correct. The board is given the fiduciary duty to manage the club, and the treasurer or the treasurer and the president together will execute according to the budget and the objectives, right? The treasurer shouldn't be able to just go off on their own and start spending money or making decisions. It should always be in line with what the board has pre-agreed. And the budget should be shared with the club. Because remember, the members of the club have to execute the project. So they need to understand what are our financial goals in terms of fundraising, for example, or we're going to do a project in the community. How much money do we have to spend on it? Because they're the ones that may actually go out and spend the money, buy the school books or, you know, the medicine or whatever it might be. So the board is entrusted, voted, elected to run the club, and that includes the finances. So David's correct, of course. Of course he is.
Yes. Yes, I know. And also, I mean, having said that, it is also the responsibility of members to ask the hard questions. That's the responsibility of members, and they need to get explanations with clarity from the board.
Yeah,
so
and hold the board accountable. Comes back to accountability, absolutely.
There's no other question in the chat box, but I have a question, or certainly something I think you can highlight on handing over of duties. I think a lot of times the focus is on the president or president-elect, secretary-elect, treasurer-elect. Could you share some insight into handing over duties of the other officers of the board? Because I think that's critical, and it doesn't really happen in clubs.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Liz. There are a couple of other questions I'm hearing about board minutes and so on, but we can come back to those if we have time. So handing over, every outgoing board member, whether they are the secretary, treasurer, or a committee chairman, has a responsibility to hand over, and not just to hand over, but to actually sit down with their successor. This is why I said the minutes are so important. Hand over the minutes of the last 12 months. As well as any other, and of course it can all be virtual and online, and we're not talking about printing, killing trees anymore. Project documents, simple things like information on vendors. So let's say, again, I reference my club, which of course I know best. You know, every year we have 3 or 4 events that we do every single year. They're the same events every year, slightly different ticket design, but it's the same event. And yet sometimes it's like we've never done it before. Who printed the tickets last year? How much did we pay? Can anybody remember where? And these things all exist. They're just held top secret in somebody's house. So we have to do a better job of putting information, I would suggest always on the cloud. Every avenue of service has a cloud repository, an archive that's managed by your secretary or even your club admin team, so that I should be able to go in and look, say, let's say I'm going to be the incoming club admin chair. I should be able to go on and look at the last 10 years of club admin documents. So even if the chairperson doesn't do a very good job handing over to me, I can at least go and have a look at the records. I can look at the membership files. I can look at templates for events, handing over ceremony, regular meetings, the district governors visit, all of those things, we've done them 1,000 times, but we just don't pass on. So archiving is the best way to undertake that.
All right, thank you. And my backup has really backed me up here. There are some other questions that are coming up, and I will take, Maria has had her hands up. Maria Mohammed. Is Maria still around? Sean, could you unmute Maria? I'm sure everybody's unmuted at this point in time. All right, if Maria is not here as yet, let me just ask, bring up some other questions that came up. Should the board members' minutes be sent to the club, or is it just for the board? This is a question that is often asked, the minutes of the board meeting.
Right. Okay. In my humble view, they should be accessible to all members, because we are supposed to, we're not hiding anything. Now, if there's a very sensitive decision that's been made, I mean, yeah, something that the rest of the club shouldn't know about, then you maybe have a separate meeting and you have that document recorded separately. But your regular board meeting, where you're discussing the projects, you're discussing progress against your objectives, those should be in the cloud, in the archives, and available to any member. Because remember, you also want to encourage your members. They should know what's going on at the board level. They should be able to be excited and inspired, and they should be able to want to aspire to be on the board. So they need access to that information. That speaks directly to the leadership objective of collaboration, sharing information. But I do recognize that there are sometimes a board decision may be very confidential for whatever reason. So that particular piece, the board could agree either not to minute it or to minute it separately and keep it away from members. But I would think that regular board meeting minutes, of course, should be accessible to members. You should have an online storage, and you just put it in, and you let members know. Yeah. Sorry, Liz.
There's a question coming here. Does club membership decision on a matter take precedence over board decision?
Okay, so the club should have at least 3 times a year a club forum. The club forum is meant to deal with things like changes to your bylaws, your constitution, significant changes in the club that the board feels. Remember, the board has a specific objective, right? You've established your plans and goals. They've been approved by the club. You've got your budget that's been approved by the club. So the board is now to execute. If something substantial changes and it's not in line with the pre-agreed objectives and budget, the board should go to the members of the club, if only for the purpose of transparency. Some decisions may not require approval. They may just require, we're just letting you know. Other decisions may require club approval. So in our club, again, my reference point, if we're changing our bylaws, and we try and review them every couple of years, maybe changes come from RI that you now need to implement in your bylaws, we always take those to a forum. We will have the document, we'll highlight the changes, and we get member approval. We don't necessarily need it because it's an RI directive that we have to follow, but we don't want members to not know what's going on or to not have a say in what's going on. So I would suggest to you that anything that's really significantly away from the budget and the plans and goals of the club, go to a forum, have an online conversation, get buy-in, and then you can bring it back. So I think it's important to include them.
All right, thank you. And there's a question on, well, the question probably for PAG, Luan, and do we have a presentation on treasurer's position in the pipeline? And any advice in the cloud platform to use when storing documents and data? I think that's a high-tech question. But the first question, the first part, PAG Luana, would you want to respond to that? Do we have any presentation in terms of the treasurer's role in the pipeline for pets?
I'm sure you do. Maybe Sonia can share.
Right out, yeah. If
Hi Liz, hi everybody. We don't have a specific training session for treasurers because we're actually going to try and pull them in on their own just before the year starts so that we can have a little one-on-one session with them. but not in this series. There are 14 weeks of meetings, so we didn't have it there.
All right, thank you. And the advice on the cloud storage, DG Lila suggested in the platform using Club Runner. Maria also added Dropbox as well to the person who asked a question about, and Google Box that PAG Luana uses very efficiently. I think it works very well. And Secretary Lisa uses that as well. That works very well. Lathan had his hand up. President Lathan.
I think some people are having a problem unmuting.
But we should be all unmuted by now.
Yeah.
But he had a question.
I put a question. Yeah. It was in the chat box. I just wanted to clarify the point, Lara, about protocol and about who speak and not speak at a meeting. Take, for example, at a charter night dinner, it's not unusual that the Prime Minister would be there or the Governor General. And it's not unusual that the Governor General or the Prime Minister may be the featured speaker.
Yes.
If the DG is present at that charter night dinner, would it be inappropriate to call on him or to ask him to speak even briefly to bring greetings or to say something?
No. So in a case like that, where your keynote speaker is one of your local dignitaries or politicians and the governor's there, and of course, if the governor's not there, perhaps you have the assistant governor, he or she should ideally bring greetings on behalf of the district to the charter ceremony or the handing over ceremony, whatever it is. And of course, but they're not the feature speaker. The point I was really making is if the district governor's visiting officially and he or she is the feature speaker, they should be the only one. But if they're not the feature speaker, it's not a problem for them to either, they could sit at the head table with your guest, they could say a few words from the district. That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Ryan is asking a question. You've heard of the presidential prerogative. What is it? Is this something that we still practice as club presidents?
That's a very political question, Ryan. Presidential prerogative. I wouldn't suggest it in Rotary because I believe that Rotary should be transparent. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? But there may be a situation where the president has, I don't think prerogative is the right word. And maybe PDG David has a bit more experience with this, can help me. I think a president, for example, could break a deadlock if there's a vote or something like that that needs to just get a decision made. But I wouldn't suggest any president just arbitrarily make decisions without consultation. David, did you have any thoughts? Milton, I'm seeing a few PDGs shaking their heads at me. Have I said it wrong, Milt? We now have you joining you live from the High Commission in London.
No, I mean, really, it's the club. So presidents can make a unilateral decision.
Yeah.
So I quite agree with you. There needs to be a discussion, and there are instances where the club membership can overturn a board decision. So
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, PDG.
Section 123 of the Constitution under mutiny.
All right. There's a question from Susan. And how do you recommend dealing with members who don't pay their membership dues in a timely manner? That's a every day, every year question.
If I had the answer to that, I would be a billionaire. Because even in my club, with me beating them over the head with a stick to pay their dues, you know, it's a really interesting question, and every club suffers from it, not just Rotary. I mean, it's a global challenge, especially now with COVID, and of course, persons who have had reduced income or even maybe lost their jobs. And many of our clubs, in our club, for example, we've had members who are retired, who really struggle to pay the dues. So you kind of have to find creative solutions. So I don't think anybody should not pay. Let me start by saying that. Exactly. You've joined a club, you know what the dues are, you have to pay the dues. But your treasurer, maybe even your membership chair, should be in touch with that person well enough to know what their challenges are. It doesn't have to be publicly broadcast, and to see whether a plan can be worked out. So in my club, we have a situation now where we have a member who didn't pay last year's dues, and we've just invoiced her now for January to June. We've paid in advance, we've paid RI, so that's all been done. And so now we have to find creative ways to coax her to pay. And her particular situation was to do with COVID and reduced income. So, you know, I think you have to have a one-on-one conversation with each person, try and figure out almost like a payment plan, a hire purchase, a payment plan. But if somebody repeatedly, you know, time after time doesn't pay and they can't have a reasonable excuse, whatever, then either they become an honorary member. We've done that as well. Senior members who can't pay, you know, let's make them honorary so they don't have to pay anymore, but they're still in the club. We love them. They just retire. They don't have much money, or they have to leave the club.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that. Someone is asking whether there's going to be a presentation on Sergeant at Arms. I don't know if, because, you know, what I would suggest, because we're all on Zoom now, it's a great opportunity for those incoming officers to visit other clubs. When you visit other clubs, you learn so many different things of how things are happening, how things are done, and you get little tips and tricks to run with.
Yeah.
All right. So there's, Cheryl had her hand up. Cheryl Ann.
Okay, I was just ensuring, thank you. I was just ensuring that I was unmuted because the host was not allowing me to unmute, even though you said everyone was unmuted. So sorry about that.
That's because he knows it's you, Cheryl, that's why.
Trini's, too many Trinis in the house.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Selma is asking a question. What is the protocol process for nominating an AG?
Sorry, but did Cheryl, you had a question, or you would?
No, Lara, I didn't.
No, she was just testing.
Just unmute. Okay, gotcha. The process for nominating an AG, the AGs are actually invited to serve by the district governor. So the district governor will typically speak with PDGs, with club presidents, just to get a sense of who might be best positioned to serve. And it has to be a past president, but it is the district governors. It's not a nomination process for assistant governor. They are asked to serve by the district governor.
So it's a selection.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to serve as AG and you let the incoming, you know, Leslie obviously is going to be governor in a year or so. If you'd like to be his assistant governor, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting him know, but it's really his choice.
Just to remind everyone who's asking the question about where we can find the recordings, it's usually on the district website. If you go to the website, everything is nicely set up by our IT specialists. And you can just click on if you want to view, if you want to register, there's a click for that. And if you want to view the presentation, there's also a click that highlights, and you can click and you should be able to access the information. But it's going to be on the website within 24 to 72 hours, I believe, because Sean would have to do some editing before it is placed there. Is there scheduled sessions for beds? Right.
So if I may, Liz, I saw a question from Ronald about using audio recording devices.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fine, Ronald, but you must get everybody's permission in advance. You must let members of the meeting know that you are recording it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, there's also a suggestion from Julianne. It's saying suggestions, can another member pay the dues for the member who is struggling to pay dues because of job loss? I don't see why not.
Yeah, no, the club is happy for the money wherever it comes from.
Yes, it's important.
As long as it's not, you know, laundered or drug money. But yeah, of course, if I'd like to help a fellow Rotarian, I think that's lovely.
Yeah, but I also think too, sometimes when you're struggling with persons having to pay, perhaps the person who, introduced the person to the club should be spoken to and ask them to also speak with that person, because I've seen instances where persons who really forgot to pay, and when they're told or written to or sent an email, literally resigned from the club. It's like, how could you dare tell me that I haven't paid? And I haven't paid. Yeah. But you have those kinds of responses happening periodically where people take it personally. So I think sometimes if you can get the person who introduced that individual to the club to talk to that person, that can serve as well.
Yeah, and it's your point is well made, because you need to deal with it on a sliding scale of being nice and gentle and coaxing and reminding to, I mean, come on, this is getting ridiculous, right? There is a scale. It's not first email is, come on, you have to be gentle and yeah, because they may have just forgotten.
Yep. Now, Kenneth is asking, how is it possible for a person from another island to attend a club meeting in another country? Easy. Just keep scouring the internet. You'll see how many clubs and where they're meeting. Yeah. And you can like clubs, follow clubs, and you can get an invitation, or you can just look at clubs in your region on Facebook.
There is also a page on the RI website, Find a Club, and there's an app as well you can download, so that you can just type in New York City and it finds a club for you that's meeting Wednesday at noon, and you can do that.
All right, last question from Sharianne. Should payments of dues by a member be available to the entire club? Should payments of dues by a member?
You mean a member who hasn't paid?
Paid, yes. I believe that's the question. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think this is a personal matter. The board probably would be aware. And in fact, even in some cases, it may just be your finance committee until it gets to the point where it's really bad. And then the board, the president may have to step in. But I don't recommend embarrassing any of your Rotarians.
The walk of shame, the call of shame. Yeah, we don't do that. Yeah. Don't do that. All right, so that's it for questions. So I'll hand back to PAG Luana. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, PP Liz, and thank you, PAG Lara, for that very informative presentation. We always leave your sessions feeling like we really did learn something. I will now ask Past President Cheryl to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Luana. All protocols observed.
Nice.
Good evening, everyone. PDG Lara, it's my honor to give the vote of thanks this evening. And I really want to thank you for your insightful presentation, demonstrating your knowledge of Rotary and your strategic leadership prowess. So thank you for sharing with us this evening. We are all very much appreciative. And I'm sure the points that you gave us this evening, the pointers, will give us a lot to think about in how we go forward in running our clubs for the next Rotary year. Additionally, I would just like to thank all who made it possible for us to have this training session this evening, the entire training team, Luana and your team, and the IT teams and everyone who contributed to making the meeting a success. I also want to say a heartfelt thank you to all who took the time to join us this evening, because without you, we'd have no meeting, and your questions were very interesting indeed. And I'm certain it helped some of us who maybe had the question in mind, but probably were too shy to ask. So thank you all for attending and have a great evening. Thanks again, PDG Lara.
Thank you.
My pleasure, thanks.
Thank you. Just a few housekeeping matters remaining. AGs, please coordinate the country representative to sit on the district training committee, and clubs, kindly identify your club trainer, because in May we will begin targeted training for club trainers and other specific roles within your club. So please, we are expecting the names to come in. So please facilitate and cooperate with us. Presentations will be on the site within 24 to 72 hours. And please go and register for the Learning Center courses. You still have time. And continue registration for the remaining pre-PET sessions. We'd love to have you join us for the remaining 11 sessions. So thank you so much and have a great rest of the evening.